Don Ritchie for moderator. And
All right, well, welcome to the College of Complexes. My name's Don, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. Our program tonight is titled Ghetto Tour. It says here, this is what it says in the program. Take a ghetto tour with Ron Carter, publisher of Chicago Street Journal, Chicago's newest media voice, on the South Side for 19 years. He says that, quote, the ghetto is not what you think it is. I'd like to introduce our speaker for the evening, Ron Carter. Let's have a warm round of applause for Ron. Okay.
One more time.
All right.
Well, hello everyone. My pleasure to be here for such a lovely group. But you know what? I know a lot of groups like me. And I've been
Sorry, honey.
the subject matter, I believe it was called something like the ghetto as you never heard it. Something to that nature. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. The Ghetto Tour. Thank you. So I need to find out who I'm talking to before I go to my relationship to the Ghetto Tour. Anybody here really knows or been through a ghetto? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Half of you all. Okay, fine. Let me kind of give you a little background about who I am. First of all, I'm a 61-year-old frustrated black man from Chicago, and in doing so, I did not know that my parents was poor until I was in Robert Taylor Homes. And in Robert Taylor Homes, 503, that was around about 1962. And then I turned around and my neighbors that lived next door to me, they were very light-skinned.
What's your name, Ronnie?
And being very light-skinned, I thought my parents really struck it rich. Because I thought that there was going to be white folks that were living around me. But as the time went on, and I started growing up, I started wondering why my father always run under the bed when this lady comes to visit. And I also started to wonder, every morning before I go to school, you have these grown men standing in front of the liquor store every morning, like clockwork. And then I wondered, as I went to school, why the books that I read did not reflect who I am. So I began to wonder, and I began to get a little frustrated. I began to wonder when I was traveling on 16th Street, 16th and State Street, going west on the west side, and I was maybe about 12 years old, and the bus get crowded between State Street and Halsted. And as that bus got so crowded, I was still able to have a seat all by myself. And I couldn't understand it. And so I go to my cousin's house every weekend, take that same route. The bus get crowded, and I still have the same seat all by myself. And then one day going toward the west side, taking that same trip, maybe about 14 years old, 13 years old, this one lady had the nerve to sit by me. And when she sat by me, that was the most wonderful feeling I had as a kid, that a white person would sit by me. And I said, wow, what is the world coming to? So I started to think, as I grew up, that when I get to be a grown man, I'm not going to have to worry about what I witnessed when I was a kid. And so, but as I got grown, before I got grown, there's a little story about I was doing some meetings. And the frustrations of me growing up, I read this one book. And this book was about the intimacy of sex. And so at maybe about 14 years old or so, I read this book. And pardon me for some of the things I'm going to say, but I think that we all are grown here. Are we?
Yes.
Are we grown?
Some people are very, very ungrown in here.
So at a preteen, reading that book, I found out what an orgasm was. And it felt good. And then I was introduced to sex. And sex felt good. But then as I grew up, I was introduced to other books. And some of those books were the autobiography of Malcolm X, the Red Book by Mao Zedong, and there was other books that I read. And then as I read those books, I began to get another one of those feelings like when you're having sex. And the next time I felt something different, other than that orgasm as a young man, was when I went to the military. And when I was in the military as a Vietnam vet, the closest thing I came close to that feeling was when I had the pleasure of beating up white folks. That was a hell of a feeling for me. The next time I had a feeling close to that is maybe about 14 years ago. And that feeling was similar to 911. And that was somewhat of another orgasm. And that reflected on the life in the ghetto. That reflected on why these men were standing in front of the liquor store 8 o'clock in the morning until it closed. You know, that reflected why the men always ran when the welfare lady came. It reflected in when my father said, go get my cigarettes out of the bathroom so that welfare lady cannot see that I live here. And it reflected when I seen the community of Robert Taylor Homes, which I thought was a high-rise luxury place, turned into a slum. And I began to want to ask the questions why. And then out of all those questions why, there were some frustrations. And those frustrations led me to be a part of gangs. And these gangs were not like they were today, but they were letting out a form of frustration of what you see and what you don't get. And so I began to get involved and want to identify with something of power, because you see that you don't have any power. And then part of that power was I heard of this other gang. And this other gang, instead of them beating up black boys, this gang beat up white boys. And so I said, I'm going to join this gang. And then when I joined this gang would not allow me to beat up white people. It said that this gang is about you developing yourself as an individual. That gang turned out to be the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party. And so as I became associated with the Black Panther Party, my life began to change. I began to read more. I began to get more educated. I began to understand why the ghetto in Chicago is not that much different than the ghetto in Iraq. And I began to realize that since from 2000 to the present, in Chicago, there was 5,000 murders, and most of those murders were children. 1/3 of them at least was children that was murdered here in Chicago, on the south and on the west side of Chicago. That's more people that were killed in Afghanistan. And looking at the comparison to the two, then we want to look at what caused this. What caused people to be able to want to pull a trigger? What caused them to feel self-hate? And what caused them to actually don't want to do anything about it? So I went on from my experience with the Black Panther Party to go on to college. And going on to college and majoring in public relations, one interesting class that I had was mass communications.
Oh, well?
And part of that mass communication was propaganda. And I studied propaganda. And I studied how it worked. And I looked at how it worked in Chicago. And I seen how when I came back to Chicago from Los Angeles after school, I got involved in community organizing. I had the experience of working with Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden. And they gave me some training on, but in the south, in the west side of Chicago, when you got young black guys killing children and killing each other, some kind of way they were taught that they are their own enemies. So if they are killing each other, saying each other as being the enemy, who is the fault if there is a ghetto? Because then we have to look at they're doing it to themselves. Going back to Shaw Linsky, the principle is, don't blame the people who you're trying to organize. Identify your enemy in order to do for the organizing purpose that you're working for. Because if you keep blaming the people for their own faults, you're never going to get nowhere. Because there is always an enemy above. Anyone here understands or know anything about the Willie Lynch letter?
The what?
Willie Lynch letter. You know about the Willie Lynch letter? Huh?
I know.
Have you practiced the Willie Lynch letter? Anybody else? Anybody? You know about the Willie Lynch letter? Briefly, tell me what it is.
It's a letter by an owner, slave owner, in somewhere in Maryland or somewhere, who told slave owners to treat their slaves in a certain way. I forget exactly.
You want to help out? I know your mouth is full, but you know, it's okay. Yeah, but you're right on it. Going back to the Willie Lynch letter, going back to Shaw Linsky, is the principle of organizing is you can't blame the people that you're trying to organize. But the Willie Lynch letter was this guy named Willie Lynch, and he told other slave owners, he said that if you follow my principle, I would guarantee you that the slave today in the 1700s will be slaves for years and years to come, if you follow my principle. But if you don't follow my principle, and you keep beating that slave is going to rebel. You're going to end up with a lot of Nat Turners. You know what Nat Turner is, right? Yeah. All right, thank you. So to avoid having a lot of net turners, you need to implement the Willie Lynch letter. And that Willie Lynch letter says that you are to create and to mold that slave so that he can like his mistreatment. You are to turn him against himself. You are to turn him to the point that he appreciate being a slave, that he like it. Anyone seen the movie The Godfather?
Yes.
I mean, Godfather 1.
Yeah.
Okay, you remember when the Godfather got his children beat up and sent over to Sicily, and what else happened? And you know, Godfather just tired of the fighting. And so they came to a restaurant, almost like this. Y'all recall? No?
Yeah, well,
All right, so he was at this restaurant, and he told his other mobsters, he said, I'm tired of this war. My children has been killed. Your children has been killed. And if this war is about drugs, then there's nothing I can do about you selling drugs. But he said, you sell those drugs to the spits and the niggers. And he said, that's where you sell these drugs. And he said, the moment you start selling those drugs to my people, then this war is on again. And I'm gonna come with you with everything I got to destroy you. Did anybody remember that part of that movie? I seen that movie maybe about 7 times, and maybe about the 6th time I heard what the Godfather was saying.
He didn't quote it right.
I didn't quote it right, but it was something to that nature. Do you agree? All right, thank you.
What's
Yeah,
next?
it was,
I'm not Italian, so I can't get right into it, all right? But there was another movie called The Panther. And in that movie, about the Panther, this is a movie about the Black Panther Party. And so the Black Panther Party was growing. The more they, you know, it's almost like that song by Bob Marley, I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. But the Black Panther Party was just popping up like mad. I think all of you, most of you are old enough to realize about the Black Panther Party. Am I right? Yeah. Okay. So the Black Panther Party was popping up all over the country. And as it was popping up, the FBI couldn't do nothing about it. So the FBI went to the drug dealers. And he told the drug dealers that we got a problem with this Black Panther movement. And so the drug dealers said, look, FBI, I got a solution to deal with the Black Panther Party. You let me sell these drugs in the black community, and I guarantee you that it would not only stop the Black Panther Party, but it would stop any progressive organizing group similar to the Black Panther Party. And I was doing the 1970s. Since the Black Panther Party was dissolved, UAP Newton, their leader, died on an overdose of drugs, almost symbolizing what the FBI said it would do. During that time, during the 70s and the 80s, it was more like the influx of drugs started coming into the scene. Not the LSD and the acid, you know, like most of you all used to do back in the days. Any witness? Ain't no witness. Not that type of drug, but this heroin and this crack and this habit that was forming. And it became a major, and think in the 70s, it was more like drugs, almost pleasure to get high. but as it turned into the 80s and the 90s, it became an economic agenda opposed to a social pleasure agenda, and it became a way of life. You all know about the lottery, correct?
Lotto?
Lotto?
Yeah.
You know the history of it. You know where it came from.
The numbers right there.
Come from the knuckle rack. You seen the movie Malcolm X?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what he was doing when he was playing those numbers and all that stuff?
Policy.
That policy was here in Chicago. The same way the policy and where the state of Illinois decided that it cannot control it and it cannot benefit from it, then it will take control of it. And as it took control of it, that's how we got the Illinois State Lottery. It's the same way we got the legalization of marijuana. So you got black guys on the corner, not just black guys, most guys, on the corner saying, God dog, here I am going to jail for this stuff, and all of a sudden some bunch of white folks legalize it, and they getting rich off of it and not going to jail. That is some of the frustrations, like the Illinois State Lottery and the legalization of drugs. The frustrations of the ghetto, I used to do this tour for different universities and all over the world.
Thank you.
We used to call it the Ghetto Tour. There was a lady by the name of Beauty Turner, and she was known all over. So we did this tour about 3 times a month. People from Japan, from France, from different universities from around the country came to do this ghetto tour in Chicago. And they came to do this ghetto tour after the projects were destroyed. There wasn't no projects there, but they still wanted to come and do this ghetto tour. They still wanted to see the historical significance of the project or the ghetto. But as they went on this tour, they also seen that the ghetto was not that much different than any other community. That it was this propaganda that brought up. I mean, even personally myself, as I grew up in the public housing, as I went to California to get my education, as I got involved in the Hollywood scene, as I got involved working with people like Jane Fonda and Tom Hayden, and got into all of that type of glorified organizing, coming back to Chicago became to be more like a challenge. And people raised the question, why do you want to come back to Chicago? Because there was something here that draws me. And then as I became successful and I got into the newspaper business, became a newspaper publisher, became the chairman of Black Wall Street Chicago, and I used to drive home in Beverly Hills. And when I drove home, sometimes I had that complex of working in the ghetto, so-called, and driving home to Beverly Hills. So the thing is to close that gap. And as to close that gap is the reason why I formed the organization called Black Wall Street Chicago. And the purpose of this was to have the visualization so that people can see what they can do. The young guys on the corner do not see themselves running the economics of their community. They do not see examples of what they can do. And because of that, lack of vision is a lack of action. If you can't see what you can do, then you most likely cannot do it, even though some do dip through the cracks. So there's a lot of significance about the ghetto that I can relate to all over the world, that I can understand when I talked about that frustration being a Vietnam vet, but yet when 911 hit and I was sitting in my living room and I seen those airplanes hit those towers, and I thought about the people that are being killed. But deep down in my soul, I felt somebody slapped America when I could not do it for the wrong that they have done. And I felt that whoever did it, was they doing it based on they are criminals, or were they doing it because they had a specific mission? I am saying that those Ben Salah, whatever his name, forgot his name. So Hassan Balama. What he did was a criminal act against the United States. What he did was still a more frustration in the ghetto is because the United States took their aggression against people that didn't have nothing to do with 911. And so in the ghetto, and I'm using that term very loosely, as we see what America do to other countries, it is a reflection of the economics of what's happening in the so-called ghetto. It's a reflection of redlining. It's a reflection of Rahm Emanuel closing 50 schools, mainly in the black neighborhood. It's a reflection of those drugs that be coming on the train tracks, and so happens to be dropped off of the tracks along with guns. You know, it's a reflection of all of that when you can't do nothing about it. So when 911 hit, somebody slapped America. We were not able to slap it because we're too involved in the Willie Lynch syndrome. And we're too involved in not knowing who is the enemy, as Charlinsky taught organizers to do. And we're so involved with politicians being used continuously and year after year after year after year. And so all that frustration build up that creates this ghetto frustration. And some of this ghetto frustration, even with this killing, that is continuously going on year after year after year in the south and west side of Chicago, when it's not happening in no other neighborhood in Chicago. And I began as a newspaper reporter, wonder, why aren't these killers in portion and parity with other ethnic groups? Why are these killings are centered in the same neighborhood over and over, year after year after year? So then you have to look at the comparison of what these communities have and what it don't have compared to others. And basically what it don't have is economic stability. The Asian community of Chinatown do not have no elected officials in Chicago, but they are able to control the economics of their community without no regrets. They have their issues, they have their problems with Chicago, but their economic stability and their children are not killing each other. In the black community, that's not the case. And I still go back on that Willie Lynch letter, and I still go back on that not able to see who is your enemy to the point that you turn within and you kill yourself. as the Godfather said, it will turn families against families, and families will start killing each other. And it will be from years from now. That movie was in 1971?
72.
72. And it was set in the 40s. So the vision of the 1940s still had an insight for the year 2014. So how do we address this? Again, I see no other alternatives. With all the solutions, I don't care for this, what we call it, what you call it, ma'am? Peace marches, I forgot what you call it.
Million Man March?
Well, even Million Man March, I don't care for the marches. I care for economic stability in order to make things happen. Don't nobody else, I mean, there's marches are good, but march against violence, yeah. If there is no economic stability as a result of doing those marches. So there's a lot to the ghetto. There's a lot to what contributes to it. As a organizer for the Chicago area project, for the Greater Roseland organization, before I got into the newspaper business, that was my job. My job was, again, as I think you said it, you know, I was taught by the National People's Action. Anybody familiar with National People's Action? Gelson Carter? National People's Action, Gelson Carter? Nobody know about Gelson Carter. Oh, the big stroke. Okay, you know Gelson Carter. She the one that taught me from the National People's Action. She taught me the roots of community organizing, and I was able to do those things. And what I've done was use the newspaper that I published to go back to the schooling that I got in Los Angeles to understand propaganda. When I was part of the Black Panther Party, I was one of those guys that was the Minister of Information. So my job was to propagandalize the Black Power movement. You know, I'm an artist. I'm the guy that drew those pictures off the pig. I'm the guy that communicated the message on how to build the spirit of the people to the point of, I think that you heard about this guy Malcolm X, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I heard of him.
So this guy Malcolm X, he did a good job of talking about the devil and calling white folks the devil. And when he did that, the psychology of him doing it wasn't against white folks. It was about bringing up black folks. That was the real, that was no different than the Shaw Alinsky approach. Is that in order for you to organize people, you gotta build them up. You gotta build them up to let them know that they're just as equal as anybody else. And if you can't build their esteem up to know that they can do, then it's gonna be harder to organize them. So he made that devil remark about white folks, and he said that that blue-eyed devil, blah, 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 blah. But as he said that, he was still not talking to white folks. He was talking to black folks, because he knew that these black folks in these ghettos was so much part of this Willie Lynch syndrome that they needed something to build their self-esteem up. And without that self-esteem, you can't hardly do anything. So as he began to use that approach to organize, he also said this thing that when this young white lady came up to him and he said, Mr. X, can I help you in your work? What can I do? And Malcolm X responded, you can't do nothing for me. Go back to your own community, but stay away, you know, let me do this. He later apologized for that. And for me, even with my workings with the Black Panther Party, being in this movement, and being more of a soldier in the Black Panther Party, I always realized that the problems of the ghetto cannot be resolved without other nationalities involved in it. It needs to have, you know, America is not going nowhere, and I haven't got my Mercedes yet, so I definitely want to be a part of this growth of America. And in doing that, we do need to come together. We do need to cross the barriers. We do need to cross the streets. And we do need to be seen. Again, when the Shaw-Linsky approach of organizing was basically focusing on training white youth to become organizers, but they did train in the back of the yards and the woodlot community and those things, and they closed the gap. And I think that we got to be able to close that gap as well. And once we could close that gap through things like this, I didn't know all you all was going to be over 50 years old.
Not all of us are.
We're close to it. I didn't know that. I thought y'all was going to be in y'all 30s, you know, something like that, or younger. I said, well, wow, I got to change my thought pattern. But I'm not going to change my thought pattern. But I think that the majority of you all here realize and have witnessed what I have witnessed. And you have seen it. And I believe that in a forum of this nature, you would not have been here if you did not have the astuteness and the insight and the overall perspective of where we are as a country and as we are as a people together, regardless of what part of the city we stay in. So I have my associate publisher, Mim, who's with us, and she just popped out of nowhere. And as we began to meet, I looked at her based on what she had to offer with her skills and with her ambassador skills in coming into the community. And as she did that good job, we changed the paper name from South Street Journal to Chicago Street Journal, and where we want to represent Chicago as a whole. So in doing so, this is not going to be my last time coming here. I'm going to come here to get to know you. I'm going to come here for you to get to have an influence in the message
Get out of the way of the camera.
of my propaganda in putting my newspaper together. So I can move on and on. Again, there's many things that we can talk about regarding the Ghetto Tour, and I believe that what I've done was not talk so much about those specifics, but more about my experiences and how I felt that I needed to get my message across. So with that, I would like to close and entertain the comments and questions and concerns.
All right, let's have one. Answers. Look, I'll call on people, but you'll be the one that answers the questions, okay? So you don't. All right, that's how we. Okay, looks like we got a lot of hands up. Margaret, do you have a question?
Are there specific economic development programs that you've seen work in your community?
Your turkey club is very similar.
All right. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
Yes, there are many things that work.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jim.
But those things that work are not in portion with what can be done. Because issues is you see the closing of the schools had more effect than on education. It had an economic impact in those particular communities because students spend money. in those communities. And when these students don't spend money, they take money away from that area. And so, as you say, there's the programs that I see that's working. Yes, there are some things that are working, but there seems as though there's always something else that comes up to overshadow those things that are working. And so it's almost like a cycle of how can you know, but then again, it's not so much about in this so-called ghetto. It does relate into many different communities. But every time we turn around, there's something new that overshadows something that could have worked.
Okay.
So what type of thing do you see working there?
I am working on as the chairman of Black Wall Street Chicago, I'm working on parity legislation with the city council right now. And where I want parity of the contract so that the community can answer your question by saying, we see evidence. That means the contract. So what ward is this?
47. Oh, I don't know, I'm sorry.
47. This is the 47th ward. The aldermen of this ward get $1.2 million per year to do infrastructure. The 47th ward, when you see people of the 47th ward doing that work in the 47th ward, that is something people can see. So if the 47th ward is, and I hate to get back on this race thing, but the reality is the 47th ward is what? How much percentage white?
Is this here?
Yeah.
Almost everyone, right?
Okay, 90% white.
No.
If it's a real mix, then that real mix should equally spend or receive that $1.2 million that the alderman gets. In the black community, they never receive it. So the visualization, so that people can see that they are actually reaping the equal value of their community. Kind of follow what I'm saying? That not only represents the contracts, but the economic growth. You see the equal amount of businesses that's on the commercial strips. You see the equal amount of people, just like Chinatown.
Yes, my dear. You want me to get it for you?
When you walk down Chinatown,
Sorry, Jean.
and this little 3-year-old boy walking with his parents, and he sees Liam's barbecue in Chinatown, that 3-year-old boy gonna pull his mama Coke and say, what is Liam's barbecue doing in Chinatown? So I'm saying the visualization needs to be answering your question.
All right, Kat, you had your hand up.
I have full disclosure. First, I think I should mention, I am currently a newspaper reporter myself.
All right.
And have been a.
What paper?
Insight Publications, which now publishes the Booster, News Star, and.
Okay.
It was at one time owned by the Sun-Times, but now it's owned independently.
Go ahead, pick yours.
And we're the old Lerner newspaper.
No, just go
All right, I
You
know.
may be familiar with.
Yes, I am.
I was an editor of the Booster. So I understand where you're coming from as far as using the newspapers as a way of educating and uplifting people. Question, 150 years ago, the worst parts of Chicago, the ghetto, if you will, was occupied not by black people, but people who looked very much like me. In fact, some of them probably were my relatives. The Irish managed to move on. 100 years ago, the neighborhoods you didn't want to go into after dark were the Italian neighborhoods. And within a few decades, those Italian neighborhoods, you know, became quite nice, quite prosperous, that kind of thing. What is it that has kept the black communities from making that same progression? They have talented people in the same abundance that we had, and yet there hasn't been that kind of opportunity.
Can I answer that?
Wait, no. What do you think the speaker should answer the question?
Explain the rebuttal period.
Rebuttal period? Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
She'll
Well,
have 5 minutes.
I have heard, you all remember Ed Bedodiak.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We do.
Years after that whole Harold Washington thing, Bedodiak was on a black radio program, and he said, well, that 28 thing, 29, he said that it wasn't about race. It was about power. And it just so happens that when people want power, they're going to use the tools that's available in order to secure that power.
Right.
And so that thing with Harold Washington, Bedodiak, again, Bedodiak said it wasn't about race. This is years after Harold Washington died. And he said that it was about us gaining our power. And it just so happens that race was the bait to secure that power, whether that power is political power or economic power. If you're able to use whatever tools you have. So the insurance companies, and not only insurance companies, the music industry. The music industry, you know, again, I don't use the term the N-word, but the music industry you've been in the newspaper business, the propaganda is to create an environment where people tend to love what is bad, and what is bad, what is good, they don't like it. So in the black community, even using the music, even using people like Ed Bedodiak, even using insurance redlining, even using the media as a whole, and then with black folks, God bless Martin Luther King. However, he wanted integration. And as he wanted integration, and he wanted black folks to be so lovey-dovey with white folks, he missed out on black folks starting wanting to be with white folks so much that they stopped spending money among themselves. They took their money and not turned it over like Chinatown did, or like other ethnics did. They was able to keep their economics among themselves. I believe that that's what happened with the black community.
Might me ask a follow-up question to what Kat asked? Are you saying that black Americans who eventually who got more money did not spend it on improving the black community the way, for example, you say the Chinese that put more money back into the Chinese community? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm trying to understand. Okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. I got a lot of hands up. Karina, I think you had your hand up earlier. Go ahead.
Under Bill Clinton, Henry Cisneros created Hope 5 and he tore down all the housing projects. Was that the right thing to do?
I would say that Bill Clinton was the worst president for black folks to ever exist. Under Bill Clinton, it was this welfare reform. It was a tearing down the public housing. It was the 3 strikes, you were out. It was, and it all did it under this program called Empowerment Zone. They said they're going to put $100 million in each, about 5 communities around the country. But at the same time they're putting out this $100 million, all the social programs, public housing, the fast demolition of public housing, the welfare, all of these other programs were harming economic stability. When public housing was torn down in the so-called ghetto, if any of you all can have this vision with me,
35th Street, 39th Street, 47th Street, 63rd Street, what is it, 63rd Street, 55th Street, all of those streets that were on State Street going east was viable commercial strips.
Yeah.
They were thriving. So when those projects went down, you go to those same business strips now,
Nothing there.
there's nothing there. Because you can be in the ghetto, but the ghetto was thriving financially. It was pumping money in those communities. And all those things happened under the Clinton administration.
Don't worry.
Okay, Dan, you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay. All right.
The schools were closed by Rahm Emanuel, 50 schools. The percentage of white kids in the schools, public schools, is now 8%. So 92% is African American and Hispanic. Where would you close the schools if the budget went down for the public schools? Which schools would you close?
I'm not sitting on the board if I were sitting on the board, I would be one of those lone rangers that fought against closing.
What if there's no money?
There's always money.
Yeah.
There's always money.
That's true.
It's just not, I believe that if you're a public official, now when I first got into organizing, I loved what I did. I was getting $250 a week when I could have went to Liberty Mutual and got $500 a week to start off. So when you're serving the public, then that means you need to do the serving. And I'm not saying you have to serve like Jesus Christ, but you got to have that type of attitude. Salaries can be cut from Rahm Emanuel and that board. A lot of things could have been cut. They just bought all this furniture. No, you don't close the schools because of, as I said earlier, the economic impact that's going to happen to that community, as well as the social barriers that's going to fall apart when you close those schools. Those things also contribute to the frustrations when I said about, want to go out and slap some white people. If you can understand what I'm saying.
Okay, all right, Charlie, do you have a question?
Yeah, Ron, I'm an outspoken advocate of gun control. But a guy told me today, and he named a bunch of neighborhoods, and he said, gangs have taken over these neighborhoods, Chuck, and the only thing you can do is go out and buy a gun.
Right.
Do you think how should I respond to this guy?
Well, again, I don't know if you was here when I was talking earlier. I grew up part of the Black Panther Party. I believe in everybody should have a gun. I mean, I don't have no gun on me now, but and I don't need no gun. I feel the glory of God to protect me. But I do believe that anyone has the right, to carry a gun. Even to the point that Saddam Olama, or whatever his name is, came here instead of hitting airplane or whatever, he had parachutes come out the airplane. Americans should be able to have a gun.
All right, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to ask, you mentioned about the housing projects being torn down and all. Where did all those people go to live?
I was part of the organizing effort to try to stop that from happening, so I was in the mix of it. My newspaper was in the mix of it. Some of those people even went to South Dakota.
Wow.
The Chicago Public Housing Authority paid for it. They were even in meetings. They said, wherever you want to go, we'll pay for it. You want to go? And some of them actually went to South Dakota, Las Vegas, all over. But a bulk of them went to the suburbs. And a bulk of them went to South Shore neighborhood. And the South Shore neighborhood felt that that overload of low income and no economic development that resulted in part of South Shore now is called K-Town, meaning Kill Town. So that's where a lot of them went to.
All right, John, did you have a question?
Yes, would you agree with this statement that there's so many guns out here, people of all classes are gonna use them? There's no way you can get all these guns off the street at one time. Will you agree?
You know, I'm just a person, I don't carry no gun, but I believe that everybody should have the right to carry a gun. I believe that those that are using the guns and killing innocent people, they do not have those guns registered. Those people, the majority of those people don't have registered guns. I believe that the people that have registered guns are, for the most part, the people that have not even used it.
All right.
That's my personal thought.
All types of people get them, if they want them.
Yeah, okay. All right, Aris,
Okay.
Yanavas, do you have a question?
You know, Mr. Carter, besides you, yourself, being one of the three Chicagoans and Americans that make me proud to be a Chicagoan and an American, I'd like to mention two more besides yourself, Jesse Jackson and Muhammad Ali. Now, Muhammad Ali, I came out of the Army as a draftee just about a year before the Vietnam War started. Then if I were to be in the Vietnam War, I'd be a coward. I was not a brave man like Muhammad Ali. I'd probably go there. But if I came back, I would be ashamed to tell people that I engaged in such a war of genocide against defenseless people.
What's your question?
But the question is, I would like to nominate Muhammad Ali for the greatest hero of the Vietnam War, because he refused to go to Asia and kill those people.
I second that motion.
You have to have a question.
I have a
You
question.
think it's- Okay, this is the question. Is it realistic to expect that if I start and you start a movement, that we make Muhammad Ali during his lifetime be recognized as the greatest hero of the Vietnam War?
I think he's already identified with that title. I believe that most people that have a reflection on the Vietnam.
One at a
To
time.
build him a big 75-foot monument somewhere downtown or somewhere like that. I don't mean.
I think if he did it before he passed, but I believe that one day somebody will take that initiative to have a big monument in honor of Muhammad Ali.
All right, Margaret.
Yeah, yes, why do we have more or do you think we have more gang killings in Chicago than in other large American cities?
The gangs, we have in our newspaper, we are integrating young people. And this one individual that's part of our newspaper, we're doing a story in our next issue about gangs. And what we have discovered, and again, if I think I said earlier that I used to be a gang member myself when I was a teen. But there is not necessarily a gang element here in Chicago like it was in the 70s and the 80s. There are many fractions of young people that are taking on this macho role. Gangs are not organized as they used to be during the 60s and the 70s and going to the 80s, because those guys were more organized. Back then, you did not have innocent people getting killed. You didn't have children getting killed. The people that was harmed was the people that was definitely involved in that arena. You never heard about innocent children getting killed and mothers and innocent people. That wasn't the norm back then. And that's because you had organized structure of those gangs. Today, there are a flux of young renegades. There's maybe about 1,000 different gangs in Chicago. They have no structure. They don't have large territories like the Vice Lords or the Blackstone or the Disciples. They had large territories that they organized.
And that kept that violence down, and the violence was targeted. But now you get a block here and a block here and a block here, and all these different renegades trying to secure their drug money and to secure their egos, and they going over this neighborhood just shooting random. They're not organized, they're not structured. And that is why we have this gang problem compared to gangs of yesterday. Gangs been around since the beginning of time. It's nothing new. For the most part, gangs gonna always be here. I mean, I was gangbanging, but I also was a Boy Scout because I wanted to be a part of something. And I wanted to feel that growth or that, even though I was in the military, I still felt a part of a quote-unquote gang. But men tend to, at one part of their youth, can I get a witness here? Want to belong.
All right, who else? Yes, ma'am.
Well, you know, I mean, I know you very well, Ron, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I just wonder if you could answer the question, what role do you think real estate speculation has to do with the quote-unquote gang killings that keep happening in the black community?
Well, when my experience is that I was a community organizer for the Chicago area project. My assignment was to go into public organizing and to build leadership. And as I was doing so, we did look at the long-term effect of public housing. We did look at the long-term effect as far as the Woodlawn community, even the Bronzeville community. The Bronzeville community, anybody familiar with the Bronzeville community?
No.
Okay, it was the ghetto.
Yeah.
It was the ghetto of the black community, from maybe about 22nd Street to 63rd Street, from the Dan Ride to the lake, naturally outside of Hyde Park. You know, you don't come in Hyde Park acting like that. So, but real estate was the key to reinvestment. Based on, if you don't reinvest, then the property will deteriorate. The people will move. At one point, the Roseland community was where real estate developers wanted to drive people out. So the strategy was, and still is to the most part, move the people out, move them out to the point that the property deteriorated. In public housing, when I was doing organizing, we found out that CHA said, well, we're not going to fix up these buildings because we know in 10 years we're going to demolish them. They slipped that out. And when they slipped that out, that wasn't then at the same time as me being an organizer, being the chairman of Black Wall Street, this may about 3 years ago, was in a meeting in Inglewood, and it was a panel of the city officials, and they indicated, because we was talking about, anybody know about the 2040 plan of the city of Chicago?
What is that?
The metropolitan area planning. The 2040 plan for the city of Chicago. Anybody heard of it?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
Tell us
What it says is what Chicago is going to look like in the year 2040. It says that it looks at the landscape of how we're going to use the land. So that was, you can go online, look up 2040, Chicago 2040. And when you do that, what's going to pop up is the Metropolitan Area Planning, CMAP. They consult with the mayor and the governor of what Chicago is going to look like in the year 2040, year 2020 and the year 2040. That have a lot to do with the real estate development. Real estate brokers are looking at that. They're looking at Bronzeville. They already projected, I was, And when my newspaper came out in 1993, we did a story in 1995 what the surrounding loop was going to look like in 10 years. And we did a front page story. In 10 years, the whole loop is going to be redeveloped. In those 10 years, it happened. In 10 years, the city of Chicago built 175,000 housing units in the near loop. That's the near south and the near west side. 175,000 housing units. So y'all remember Skid Row. Y'all remember so-called Jewtown. All of those things was part of the 2040 plan, where real estate had to be the prime direction on what the city will do and what the city will not do. So a lot of time, the zoning and the permits and a lot of business and property owners was trying to figure out why they can't get the zoning, why they can't get these permits, why they can't get these type of licenses, because the real estate plan of the 2040 saying it's a waste of time to give these people these type of licenses, these type of permits, because it will get in the way of what is going to happen in the year 2020 and the year 2040. That is what happened with the near south and west side of Chicago. And if any of you all can recall, that area was blighted for a very long time. It stayed that way, idle. Nothing happened to that property. It just sat still. And then all of a sudden, and if you all can recall, within a 5 to 10 year period, the near south and west side popped up like, what, wild weeds? I mean, if I'm talking to myself, or do y'all?
Yeah, I know what
you're saying. Okay. So that have a lot to do with, you know, again, just go to the 2040, go online, look at 2040, CMAP, Chicago Metropolitan Area Planning, and you will see what city is planning, and you will also see, does it affect your particular neighborhood as well?
Okay, Bill.
Okay.
Are you at all familiar with Anthony Downs?
Anthony Downs?
Yeah.
I don't know who's that.
Okay, all right, Dave.
Yes, you said that when they tore down all the big public housing projects like Robert Taylor. Some of them, like Chatham, they had a lot of money too.
Yeah, they moved all over. A buck did go to the suburbs, a buck did go to South Shore. Yes, and a buck went to Inglewood. But they didn't go to this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it was made sure that they not come to this neighborhood and any other neighborhood outside of neighborhoods that was already depressed.
Okay, just let me get, I see some, okay, Tim, did you have a question?
I'm actually looking at the 2040 Plan of Chicago online right now, and I see things like sustainable communities, livable green space, parks. I mean, and it looks like they're trying to plan the city in a more efficient way to benefit the people. What have you got to say about that?
I fought with this CMAP. And I told them directly, as chairman of the Black Wall Street, I told them directly that, did I use SHIT? I don't know if I used that word or not.
You can say that.
Okay, I said y'all full of shit.
Okay.
And I said that you are people like 63rd and Halsted was the, just not 63rd and Halsted, from State Street to Western. It was and 63rd and Halsted was the most viable business strip second to the Gold Coast in Chicago. It was just that much economic bloom around 63rd and Halsted.
Would you like more iced tea, my friend?
That strip went through
three different transitions. The first transition, they blocked it off like they did downtown. Remember how downtown they stopped traffic from going down there? You know, they tried to make State Street like a mall.
State Street Mall, yeah.
Yeah, that was a disaster. They did the same thing to 63rd and Halsted. After they did State Street.
They don't even learn from the
So
mistakes.
it made a disaster. And so they said, okay, well, it didn't work on State Street, maybe it's not going to work on 63rd Street. And then they changed it back to open street. And then they turned around and tore down all those businesses and made a college, Kennedy King College, rebuilt Community College.
Right.
And all that space around there is green space. And when you have all that green, I love parks, you know, I got 2 dogs. I love jumping and running and climbing trees and all that stuff. But that green space took away economic stability in those particular communities. And I don't have the actual investigative proof, but I believe the green space is a facade for something else.
Okay. All right.
Green
All right, let
space,
me,
man.
let me just, is there anybody who has a question who's not already asked a question? I know Pat, you had your hand up once before. Nobody, okay, I know Mike, you asked a question once before. Okay.
About 5 to 10 minutes before I get to
You think you want
rebuttals.
to go for another 5, 10 minutes? Okay.
Maybe 5.
Tell you what, we got enough time to, I actually have a, I actually do have a question that I'd like to ask. Now, you mentioned that you used to be a member of the Black Panther Party, and I wanted to ask, what were the, I actually am not old enough to remember when the Black Panther Party was still active, but what were, so I don't know a whole lot about it. What were the goals of the Black Panther Party, and what ultimately happened? I mean, the Black Panther Party doesn't exist anymore except for that group that's calling itself the new Black Panther Party. But the original Black Panther Party didn't last. What happened? And what were the
Well,
goals?
as I said, you know, earlier, when the FBI and the drug kings came together, they strategized, because again, the Black Panther Party somewhat came together initially to stop drugs in Oakland, California. They actually, that's what they did. They came together under 2 purposes: to stop the drugs in Oakland, California, and to stop police harassment. That, and again, the Black Panther original name was the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. That's the original purpose.
Okay.
I believe that I do kind of battle back and forth with the Panther Party based on the 10-point platform of the Black Panther Party is no different than, somewhat different than the Constitution of the United States.
Okay.
And if you go online and you look up the 10-point platform of the Black Panther Party, you will see that all you got to do is take out the word black and it'll relate to you.
Okay. All right, Ernie, you have a question?
Yes, lately there have been a lot of demonstrations by Palestinians, largely having to do with Gaza. What parallels do you see between the problems of blacks some years ago, and maybe even today, and the Palestinians, and what parallels are there not in that situation?
You know, I was profound maybe about 3 days ago. There was a video, and I didn't even get the name of it, but this lady came on and she was making this speech about that. But she mainly accused the United States of this, accusing people of being surgeons and terrorists when the United States are the real terrorists and insurgents in other countries. I am not astute on the international agenda, as you asked the question. But I do identify with, no, I'm not a student. I am confused. I am confused based on who is right and who is wrong. I do know that when I was a little boy, playing with my cowboys and Indians, for some crazy reason, I always wanted to be an Indian, opposed to being a Southern. So I still kind of take that type of position. The specifics of your question, I cannot address, but I do know that imperialism exists, and I do believe that, you know, religion does intoxicate people's direction, but I believe that money is the root of all of it.
All right, we got a little bit more time for questions. I can see we got Pat. So let me get to, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah,
We're gonna be going at 5 after, maybe 6 after.
On the south side, around the same time as a transplant from Hawaii by the name of Barack Obama. Did you have any interaction with him? And if so, what was your impression about what we might expect eventually in terms of his attitude toward urban resurgence and the things that can be done to revitalize communities, both black and white and Hispanic? He hasn't said much about that, and that surprises me given his past background.
When, you know, I know Barack personally. I didn't hang out with him going drinking beer, but we know each other. As a matter of fact, my family was with him last week because my cousin was a Vietnam vet with Secretary Haig. And so I do know Barack personally. We have here private meetings. When Harold Washington became mayor, and I was doing my community organizing, I said to myself that it's time to leave community organizing, because all Harold Washington did was hire the community organizers. And so the community organizers knew our tactics. They knew our strategy. Because they was my partners, they were my friends, you know, and I could not, and the community did not allow us to say anything negative about Harold Washington. It was hard to be a community organizer under Harold Washington administration because it was that force field around Harold that people wouldn't let you do it. My workings with Barack Obama, I think when he was in Bronzeville, and I didn't like him when I first heard about him because of, you know, because I was community organizing in depth. And the first thing I heard about Barack Obama was that he was doing a organizing school. And I thought to myself, what the hell am I going to do an organizing school? And I ain't never seen him do no organizing. But he was doing something in a different community. But I did get to know him. We did meet. I think the first time I met with him, we was going to be on this radio station together. Now, Cliff Kelly booked us at the same time. And so both of us had an attitude because we was taking time from each other. That was, but we ended up being on this radio program together talking. That was my first encounter with him. We did get to know each other. As I said earlier, I lived in the Beverly neighborhood. People in Beverly knew me. I always threatened about running for alderman in the Beverly neighborhood, even though the community was about 70% white, 30% black. I just messed with the folks. Said, I'm gonna run for alderman. And they just got, yeah. So anyway, I was there, Obama was there, and we had some talk. Now before that, they used to tell me, Ron, you ain't gonna get no black man in Chicago no more. If you gonna get a black mayor,
you need to go talk to Barack Obama, because we ain't gonna vote for nobody but Barack Obama. So I went to Barack Obama and I asked him about that. In some kind of way, Barack Obama just said, no, he ain't gonna do it. So we kept talking, and he got elected office and things of that nature. When he spoke at public places, he always talked about the Shaw Alinsky style of organizing. He put the ownership on the people. But my problem is my family went to the White House last week or a week and a half ago to visit. You know, they was in the White House. And just last week they told me about their experiences. You going to sleep? What are you doing? And so,
listening very intently.
So what they told me was that, and what I realized, he is a very humble man, but I believe that he is no different than any other president. I mean, it's a historical significance, and it's good for the nation that black man became. I believe that he has fixed America in the mess it was in when he took, but I believe that that is automatically, I think America is going to always take care of itself. Things are just going to always happen regardless of who the president is. So, but I don't think that Barack has practiced what he said his legacy was about prior to getting into public office. I have not seen those types of traits, and I'm comparing that to Harold Washington, where I've seen his workings with organizing. I've seen how he used his political might to lift up people, to organize people. I think that Barack could have done that, and I don't think he's not going to do that because there ain't no time to do it.
Okay. How we,
It's about 8:10, we should get the
We might
rebuttals.
get into the rebuttal period.
Shut up, Charlie, we'll get
What?
the rebuttals.
Okay, that's a good question, Mike. Okay, where's the, where?
It was known as the South Side, South Street Journal. We changed it to Chicago. So when we come out next week, and Andy, he had an article in the last issue. So that means that we're going to have it on this part of the city because we changed our name from South to Chicago. So we are going to stand and get that picture here for you all to have. So,
all right. Let's have a warm round of applause for our speaker. Okay. All right, now we'll get into the rebuttal period, okay? First of all, now, can I have your attention, please, folks? All right. Now, first of all, I need to just ask you all, I need to show of hands, how many people wish to speak? Okay, I'm going to count. I want to keep those hands up, people. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Frank is 9, and 10. And we got okay, so it's 10 people.
About 4 minutes each.
Oh, I disagree, Tim. I'd say 5 minutes.
You want it?
How do you get 59, 15?
We can do it in 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Frank.
You want 5 minutes?
Mathematics.
I just did the math. I have a cheat sheet in front of me. I just did the math myself.
8:15 is 45 minutes. How do you give 10 minutes to 10 minutes?
First of all, I want to recommend the speaker to read his book he may already have, Always Running by Luis Rodriguez. He described the fight or the real estaters and the police working in conjunction to displace people and make big deals in Los Angeles, and then he moved to Chicago and he ran into the same problem. He's a wonderful speaker, a wonderful writer, and an artist too. So with 4% of the world's population, we have 25% of all the people in prison. We know that. 25% of the prisoners in the world in private institutions for profit. We also have 25 times the amount of juveniles in detention centers than France does. 25 times per population. Also, in private institutions, it costs $68,000 per year to keep a juvenile in detention.
Guys, we're not gonna be sleeping tonight.
The long-term costs of society are incalculable, and today's lecture demonstrated that. Thank you very much.
I too wish to thank our speaker for his insights, and I want to compare him very briefly to Jesse Jackson, in that he wants, it appears to me, to have prosperity for everyone in the capitalist image. I disagree with that image. What we are lacking here now is what I talked about earlier. Fidel Castro, with 35 people and 2 boats from Mexico, landed on the east coast of Cuba. He's going to conquer Cuba, which is an American protectorate, and with 35 people. But he started marching from the east end, and people began to join him. As a matter of fact, many people, many of the soldiers from Batista's army joined him as well. And by the time he got to Havana, he had an army of almost 40,000 people. That's amazing. And Batista said, I'm out of here. He went to Florida. So did the upper middle class, most of whom were white. For lack of a better term, they were white. Most of the people who joined him in his efforts to conquer Cuba were in fact black people, former slaves, the remnant of slavery in Cuba. Cuba was one of those countries that was the breaking point, the breaking site for African slaves. When they came over, they would put them in either Curacao or in Cuba, where they would beat them mercilessly until they became compliant, and then they could be sold as slaves. Many of the descendants of those people live in Cuba at the present time. Where are we? Why don't we start someplace and begin the process of taking over this country the way it should be? We don't have to rely on that. Batista or Mitt Romney or the Koch brothers, they'll leave. I don't know where they'll go. I don't care. But it's time for us to end the concept of nonviolence.
Marx. Have a good spaceship to send it.
All right.
Next.
Encore. If you believe that, you buy yourself a rifle and start killing people, or otherwise shut up.
Hey, just take it easy, Mike.
You be the first to start killing people. When it's set up about end nonviolence.
Mike, let Bill Wynn speak. Now here, I'll help you with the microphone. Here, Bill. Do you want to just hold it in your hand?
Yeah, I guess I can do that.
Okay.
Speaker and I have a lot of things to talk about. And all I've been doing lately here at the college is collecting email addresses. I'd kind of like to know if the paper has an email address. But anyway, I think it's concerns for everybody. I think you'd find it very interesting to see my email about a genuine free market as opposed to a phony free market.
Yeah, I couldn't put it down when I got it.
But anyway, that's another long topic too. But I think one thing that could be dealt with, I think you ought to read some books by Anthony Downs not that he's published anything lately, but he has published some very influential books on urban renewal topics, including an article in 1968 that proposed a vertical core strategy by which downtown would be surrounded by upscale housing and eventually expand and push everything else out of the city. But anyway, I agree with a lot of his observations in Harold Washington for different reasons, because I never could see any difference between his urban renewal and transportation policies and those of Jane Byrne. And he hired some, well, his director or commissioner of planning, Elizabeth Hollander, came right from the Metropolitan Planning Council, which is planning a lot of the urban renewal around town too. But as far as gun control and the National Guard are concerned, I've come up with an idea on resolving all reasonable concerns about that. Well, that's a speech in itself, and I've got a lot of it on email. But anyway, it would also solve a major foreign policy problem, like getting into all these foreign wars. But I guess I can leave it at that. But I do want email addresses for the, for the foreseeable future.
Can put it on the table. It's
Oh,
holy,
here.
bro.
Okay.
I want your email address too, and I might need a write tonight.
I'm Michael Foley. Joe, I don't know if you hear the words that come out of your mouth or if you even think about what you said. Anybody that stands up anywhere and says, it's time to end this cycle of non-violence, I'll say what I just said to Joe. Whoever says that, you grab the rifle and you go to start killing police officers and start killing politicians. And if you're not ready to stand up and start killing politicians and police officers, then you shut your mouth about ending nonviolence. Anybody that starts that BS is always saying, oh, we should end this nonviolence. You will get a rifle and kill police officers and politicians. You will get a rifle and kill police officers and politicians. You will get a rifle and police officers kill. And the guy that says that we're going to end this nonviolence, he's running like hell that way. I'll say it again. If somebody wants to end nonviolence, grab yourself a rifle and start killing police officers and politicians, or shut your mouth about ending nonviolence.
That makes a lot of sense to me, you know.
Okay, next.
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 Yeah.
We have an open mic, and it's kind of.
It's really open.
Yeah.
This made a lot of sense, public policy.
Chicago Fire Department.
Yeah, caps and farm.
Jay, would you like more ice?
First of all,
No, thanks.
the question was asked this evening, what happened to the Black Panther Party? Well, in Illinois, and I'm sure our speaker, who I would like to thank, who did a tremendous job.
Thank you, Gene.
As I'm sure he is well aware, in Illinois, two of those Black Panthers were named Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. And we know all too well what happened to them. And to my friend Joe Mayer, on the subject of violence versus nonviolence, well, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were on the receiving end of violence. And that brings me to the comment that Robert Kennedy made on the night that Martin Luther King was killed, or no, the next day, when he was delivering a speech on the subject on that subject. And he asked, you know, what has violence ever accomplished?
Thank you.
Thank you, my dear.
And I would ask the same thing. And having grown up at a time when the then President of the United States, who I greatly admired, still do, was assassinated, when I saw the deaths of Dr. King and Malcolm X and Medgar Evers, and yes, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, I'm not in any hurry to call for violence as a means of social change. Yes, I'm not a pacifist. I think that people can be pushed into a corner, pushed too far, pushed into a corner, then they have to fight because what else is left? But I don't think that we're at that point yet, at least I hope not. And I'm not in any hurry to end the culture of nonviolence. Thank you.
Well, I guess I can hold it. Yeah, I want to thank our speaker for a very interesting talk, and I really enjoyed it. Learned a few things, but in many ways I've lived in Chicago long enough that it was kind of a trip down memory lane, at least as far as some of the headlines that you were talking about over the years. The main thing that I got out of your talk that I would like to kind of reiterate to many of the people here who are very much anti-gun and pro-gun control folks is I think you have a sensible attitude toward gun control, and in particular the concealed carry law that we have. The way it's implemented, it won't do as much good as it would do if it were implemented in a more sensible way. But with all the restrictions, there will be less people able to carry, particularly people like myself who don't have a car. If you don't have a car, essentially you can't have a concealed weapon. You can walk around your own neighborhood with it, but you can't take it on transit. So that's the end of that. And the law, concealed carry does make the streets just a little bit safer in the areas where people have it. Okay, and now the other law, I had a little conversation about this today down at the Bughouse Square with a fellow with a table on guns, and we were talking about stop and frisk, which we don't have here in Chicago at all, or in Illinois, I don't believe. They used to have in New York, and they banned it. The irony here is, yes, the stop and frisk was probably used in many cases unfairly against minorities. It targeted minorities a little bit. On the other hand, to the extent that it stopped gun violence by catching people with guns and taking them away, the vast majority of victims of gun violence here and in New York, and I think in most cities, are minorities. So you got kind of a strange catch-22 there. Thank you.
There's a hole in there, can you see it?
I don't know, they talk pro-gun or what? Everybody wants to solve it and buy a gun.
Everybody should have a machine gun, Charlie.
Wait a minute, the microphone is messed up.
Yeah, let's go kill some people tonight.
Okay, nobody knows how to,
Kill bad
nobody knows
guys.
how to stick this thing in here except, hey,
I'll
it's
get
broken.
it.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, then I don't think we need to worry too much about this. First off, I'd like to mention to our speaker, you gave a very, very engrossing talk. And you don't know me, but sometimes people who do know me will tell you that when I am most interested in something and listening most carefully, it looks like I'm not making a move. And so I was far from sleeping. I wanted to hear your insights because of the fact that I knew that Barack Obama had been a community organizer around the South Side. I knew he had talked a very good game back in those days. And I frankly was kind of disappointed that some of the things that he had talked about back in the day, I'm sure when you hung out with him, have not materialized. And I happen to be a great believer that if we cannot heal our country, if we cannot rebuild our country, we should not attempt to do quote-unquote nation building in other parts of the world, where not only do they not want us, but we have little hope of making any fundamental changes in that part of the world, even if we want to. I asked about why the things that happened in the Irish community and the Italian community over the past 150 years, where we were the gangbangers 150 years ago, so much so that during the Civil War, the United States Army did not want to go into certain neighborhoods in Chicago to look for deserters because they were afraid, even though they were armed. What happened within a generation, that changed, and the people who were running the gangs were running the city. Same with the Italians. They went into other professions, other occupations. And hey, let's not stereotype here. I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about the restaurant business. Okay, seriously. But it is interesting how different groups over the years have managed to assimilate and develop centers of power of their own. And we have not really seen that kind of thing. We've seen it in the Hispanic community. It's happening every day. But we really haven't seen that sort of thing in the black community. And maybe your paper is going to be a catalyst to help make that thing happen, just like the Chicago Defender used to be a catalyst in the black community back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and helped shape a lot of the early civil rights initiatives. So, yeah, this has been quite thought-provoking, and it's something that doesn't just affect the black community, it affects our entire community, because whether we want to admit it or not, what happens in places like Brownsville, what happens in places on the near west side and the near south side, ultimately are going to be affecting places like Rogers Park and Uptown, and even my neighborhood over by Montrose and Milwaukee. We do live in an increasingly small world, and when you consider the fact that we have more casualties in Chicago every weekend from gunfire, killed and wounded, than we do in the Middle East, if I were a Chicago policeman, I would take the easy way out and ask to be deployed with the National Guard or the reserves to go to the Middle East, where the duty would be probably a lot easier and a lot safer than it is here. This should not happen in an American city. We're supposedly one of the most advanced societies in the world, and I said supposedly.
Yes.
Note, okay? And yet we can't get this sort of thing under control. And I have to say, Mr. Obama, wherever you are, I'm disappointed, because a lot of us expected more of you, if not in the first term, in the second term. And I understand that presidents don't always get to do what they want because they've got 15 people telling them why they can't do it. And in some cases, those people may or may not be right. The fact of the matter is, time is running out, Mr. President. We do expect certain things. You did some fairly good work, in putting the brakes on a recession that threatened to become a depression. But there are other things here that need to be addressed. So if there are any FBI spies or anyone else that passes on what goes on here at the College of Complexes to the powers that be, we wish the president well. We only wish that he would get to work and start doing the things that we're paying him $400,000 a year to do. Thank you.
All right, Ken, hey, encore, encore, more.
Not everybody.
You guys telling the President of the United States what to do? What's in that cup, man? All right, first of all, let's thank our speaker, Ron Carter, for his initial visitation here on a multitude of subjects. I'll be brief. Basically, we encourage you to come back again now that you know the landscape. Just a few things here. He did mention CMAP, and metropolitan planning is perhaps not the most excitable, interesting topic that there can be. However, I must concur with the speaker that there is a nefarious organization, this Metropolitan Planning Group. I've had disputes on several occasions with them. One of the things, the inception, was that they were instigating the sale of the infrastructure of the area, such as the parking meter deal. And they were crafting legislation, which I vehemently opposed. And even, I won't get into the point, but that is, and they also, it's headed up by two individuals for whom I have little or no regard. One of whom is in fact running that mayor's infrastructure committee that he established. That's what I'm telling you. Now there are some aspects of urban metropolitan planning that are very positive, such as neighborhoods and sustainable communities. I was traveling last week in rural areas, and I said, these aren't really communities. They're small towns. Like, they didn't have the basic thing that you need. I said, I can walk to grocery stores or dry clean. They had nothing. They're not really neighborhoods. They're not communities. The rural areas that really don't qualify as, if we use the term neighborhood. But nevertheless, that's a separate topic. It's something I think. The other thing I've gotten in, I've had many conflicts on transportation with metropolitan planning. We do not see eye to eye on any aspect. And I am not alone in my opposition to this. The three transit services and RTA are on my side of the issue in opposition to this organization, as well as, amazingly enough, the Chicago Tribune reporters. And have quoted me a number of times in criticism of them. But anyhow, that's another thing. Maybe we'll take it up sometime. It's a very interesting topic and a very central one towards our communities here. Last of all, though, I've got to say something about guns, and if we're going to have communities. You know, I gave a speech on the American Revolution, and the way the conflict ended in the United States was that, very ceremoniously, you may not be aware of it, but when the British Army surrendered, or the other, any army surrendered in those days, they very ceremoniously marched, and they had a little thing where they would put down their weapons, and that's what's got to happen to our communities here. Now, if you think I'm going to return home tonight, and I've heard something, everyone has a right to have a gun, my loony neighbor does not have a right to a gun because it disrupts my domestic tranquility, and in the event my cat Halstead escapes, in the middle of the night, I invite you, Ernie, to come over and go out in the middle of the night and go through the yards and retrieve my cat. And hopefully, my loony neighbor will not mistake you for a bad guy. Thank you very much for coming in. That's what dogs, yeah, the sheep people, man.
Yeah, right.
Easiest way to have a nice community, get gun-free zones, man. Gun-free zones.
It is my firm contention that we've only let blacks assimilate in our society for the last 40 years. Remember, they did not become full citizens until we had the historic passage of the Voting Rights Act. and other things in the 1960s, which finally gave them equal protection under the law. Our other minority groups, like the Irish, like the Catholics, had those protections under the law and were fully able to integrate, assimilate, and engage in economic activity, which fairly only recently happened to the black people of this country. And it is my contention that we will see an end to this poverty and this other type of problem within the next few years. The one thing you have to realize about our country, though, is that we are aging. We are fast becoming a population that's a little bit on the aging side. And we're going to be needing people to come into this country in order to take care of us and to sustain our Social Security system. And as this thing is also worldwide. As the country gets prosperous, people make over about $8,000 a year or thereabouts. According to the CIA World Factbook, population starts stabilizing off. And what it's doing is that I firmly believe that globalization and the power of the modern corporation, Wall Street banks, have been largely responsible for the prosperity of the world coming around. What? And hopefully, if Charlie will agree, I'll give a full talk on this on November 8th. But my firm contention is that I like what our speaker had to say. But we just haven't had enough time lapse for these things to happen. In a lot of countries, the favela, the poverty area, given a chance, like in the Hispanic communities, thrive. Small businesses grow up. People trade, they get better. And as people advance their lives and get better, there's a certain type of things, like the Chinese, for example, they take care of their own. And yes, a lot of the blacks have had policies that have not let that happen. But I think finally, with the passage of the Civil Rights Act, with the equal protection under the law, and maybe a few affirmative action programs, that it's only just a matter of time before we see this happening. Right now, you have about 30% of your black population becoming middle class. And it's only a matter of time before our country recovers economically, recovers things. And the biggest thing that's going to be the driver of that is some kind of form of cheap energy. I've talked about this in the past about nuclear power. So hopefully, if Charlie approves the speech, November 8th will be the full disclosure on why we need the Wall Street banks and the development and corporations and the whole shot. Thank you.
All the ghetto needs is cheap energy.
All right.
Come on.
Oh, I believe it, Charlie.
Oh.
One pull at a time, y'all.
Okay, so somebody cut back on Tim's Kool-Aid, please. Because what he's saying is not correct. The issue of discrimination and prejudice against African peoples and their descendants started very early in this country with the bringing over of slaves, although slavery at the time was really many kinds of people, not just people who were African. In fact, my own great-grandmother was brought over here as an indentured servant, which meant that basically she was a slave for 5 years or whatever it was until she paid off her passage.
Margaret, which country from?
Ireland in the 1800s. And, but what happened with African people was because it was pretty easy to decide who was African and who was not. It became a quote-unquote peculiar institution, and if anybody's interested, John Hope Franklin wrote an excellent history that is different than the history that you normally read in the books, and certainly is very, he was a recognized historian and wrote an excellent history about it. But it became more and more focused on African peoples, and it became more and more racist, and to the point where in Mississippi, if you had one drop of African blood, you were denied all kinds of rights. After the Civil War was fought in the slaves were freed, I should put that in quotes, there was a period of Reconstruction where the Union troops occupied the southern states, and people were able to vote, or black men were able to vote. And so they elected Frederick Douglass and various other black legislators. And then after the troops were withdrawn, then you had Jim Crow, and then nobody. People couldn't even vote down there. They had all kinds of voting restrictions for people. If you were black, you could only vote if your grandfather voted, and or you had to like recite the Constitution from memory, which I would be surprised if anybody here could do that, who was born here. Some people who immigrated here might be able to do it, but people who were born here cannot. This has been a whole history of excluding certain people and defining certain people as different, that allowed the people who had wealth to prevent people from getting together, people who had common interests, working class people, farmers, who made the vast proportion of the population from joining together in common interest to force changes in a system that was exploiting them and giving them all kinds of pain. And when when people who had power were able to divide people so that people were fighting each other instead of joining together to fight the people who were really oppressing them, they succeeded in doing that. And that's what's happening with the schools now. I went to the schools hearings about what the budget was going to be, and it was really awful because they sat there and lied to us about what was happening. They laid off in the last 5 years something like 200 librarians, and now only with the closings, 43% of Chicago public schools have a library. And this woman sat up there and said, oh, well, we have 100 positions, but we've been looking and we can't find any qualified people. And I said, what a lie. What a lie. Why are they doing this? And the reason is that the budget has always been smoke and mirrors. It's always been, well, we don't have the money, we don't have this, we don't have that. And the real reason, they also had another hearing where the real reason that we don't have the money is because of the pensions that we have to pay the teachers. Well, excuse me, those people dedicated 30 or 40 years of their life to teaching children. They don't get Social Security because they're public employees of a government entity. And now they don't want to pay them their pension? You know, hello. So I think that what this is happening now, the schools, pulling schools, the point that he made out of the neighborhoods is destabilizing the neighborhoods because of all the things that happen in schools. And so if you don't distract me, I will be able to,
your time's up.
If you don't distract me, I will be able to end this. But you sit here and talk to me, and I'm going to take more time because you're making me distracted. At any rate, so he's full of whatever. And I just want people to see that this power thing that's happening is something that's a repeat of what's going on in the history of this country.
Okay.
And it's happening now in Chicago.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right. And yes, I will say what Margaret wanted to say. Yes, I am full of shit, but nevertheless, I am the moderator, and you have to respect that, okay? All right. That's right. Call me a Nazi or call me any blank thing you want.
It's called equal time.
After all, you know the Republicans say that Obama's a Nazi.
You're a Republican.
Oh, that's right.
And proud of it.
Get him out of here.
I'd much rather go to the Republicans in
Anybody got a
Moscow.
gun?
No.
Much rather go to the Republicans in Moscow, Charlie.
Hey, all right. This is not okay.
It's not what?
Once again, I would say, you know, Ron gave a really good presentation about what's happening in the ghetto, the African American community. The last speaker that was up here, Margaret, she made a really, really good comment about, I make that almost every week, talking about how the media has people that just lie to us on a bunch of different things. It's hard to find the truth. If you can only buy one book a year, I would recommend this one. It's censored. This is censored to 2014 out of Sonoma State University. It's the top 25 blacked out stories of the year. We're coming. Well, I'll mention one thing. Last week we had a presentation on the top blacked out news. There's half a dozen of the flyers, different pieces of literature we handed out last week. This one is on the yellow paper. It's called the $1 Trillion Golden Triangle. And it describes 3 myths that form a triangle promoted by the media. The media is in the center promoting these myths. And those 3 myths are responsible for a welfare system for billionaires in this country. These 3 myths are responsible for the transfer of several $1 trillion of taxpayer money into the bank accounts of obscenely rich billionaires. Nothing else like this is happening in any other modern country on the planet. These 3 myths, as well as dozens of others promoted in America on a daily basis, wouldn't be remotely possible without the billionaire-dominated total control of the billionaire-owned corporate media. Also, these 3 particular myths, the military, the myth of 9/11, the myth of our pharmaceutical media industrial complex, putting out medicines that help people for 12 cents for a bottle, they sell it for $300. The for-profit medical industrial complex in this country is a disgrace to humanity, among other things. And 300,000 to 700,000 Americans die every year needlessly in hospitals from what's called iatrogenic mistakes, doctor-caused or hospital-caused mistakes. For those of you that are not familiar with the top 10 blacked out subjects, we handed out, this blue flyer is from 1997. We just reprinted. I didn't have Google or the internet back then. I was using just books. These top 10 subjects have all moved forward to a massive database. There's nothing controversial at all about these 10. They were controversial back then to people that don't believe these things are happening. But now, you know, things get better when people stand up and say, I'm not going to take the lies anymore. We're going to face reality. The Catholic Church has been addressing the problem of the pedophile priest because enough people voted with their money in their feet. The Homeland Security complex in this country, hundreds of billions of dollars a year is being wasted in police departments, everything else, driven by the myth of 9/11. We puncture that one myth and recognize that 9/11 was a Hollywood extravaganza created by the Bush administration, our country would be a different place. We've got 5% of the world's people, like Frank said, but we spend $1 trillion a year on the military-industrial complex, more than the rest of the world combined. We're coming to the end of the greatest failure of a governing philosophy in the modern history of the human race, and that philosophy is what is known as Reaganomics. We're in our 34th year of shoveling money to rich people, obscenely rich billionaires, thinking that the middle class will get better. The middle class, poor people across the board, the middle class on down is under concerted economic attack at all levels from the sociopathic billionaire predators that have no ethics, no morals, and no conscience. And until we address those issues, things will continue to get worse in America. But things can get better if we adopt policies that are happening all over the world in many other countries. Anybody wants any more information, in the book references or anything, come see me after the talk is over tonight. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Attaboy, Andy.
Good talk, Margaret. You deal right on the mic.
check and make certain she doesn't have a gun.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for bringing Ron to have a forum to speak. I'm working as the associate publisher now for the Chicago Street Journal, and I feel that my mission is to reach out to people like the people in this room, because I believe that there is some social change that Obama really wanted to have happen, but he didn't have the grassroots support to do it. And the people in this room are the grassroots that could make it happen. And that's what the Chicago Street Journal really is all about. It's about community organizing, and there's never been any community organizing that was ever done successfully, to my knowledge, that didn't have some kind of publication, some kind of internal media support, and that's what we're about. So I'm so excited to hear the thoughts that are happening in this room. Everything Margaret said, it's like just, I was sitting there going, yes, this is beautiful. I am a nonviolence activist who marches regularly. And I actually met Ron as being part of the nonviolence group in Chicago, where in the South Side, where the strongest nonviolence activism is happening. I'm a member of St. Sabina Church.
No.
And one of the things that we've been talking about, and I actually am just like leaving it out on the table, we've been talking about the Blair Holt Law. What I found out when I started marching and working with nonviolence activists, the reason why it happened to me, why I started doing this, was because I was a victim of violence and I could not get the police to help me. And I couldn't find any community support. I couldn't, it was like really, when you start realizing there's some people who the system isn't working for, and why is that? And I started talking to other people that were part of that movement, and most of them are not for strict gun control. What I started finding out was that most of them are saying what we're doing right now isn't working. There are many people who say, well, if there were no guns, nobody had access, nobody would be shooting each other. There's other people who are saying, well, then only criminals have guns. I've heard something put on the table, and this is licensed guns like cars. And I don't know what the people in this room think about that, but this has been, on the table for a long time. They've been trying to pass these laws, and, it seems like the problem partially is that the laws are written strangely in such a way that it's almost like the laws are written in order to help the gangbangers and the gun runners, and not to protect the people, even though you do have laws. So that's my own passion. I'm really excited about, I hope that we can come back and talk to you. I hope you will write letters to the editor, to our paper, and put some of these thoughts that you have in writing. We have a paper that is not just, it started out as a black publication, but there's so many common interests. There's so many right now, and my passion is that women are being imprisoned right now. The rate of imprisonment of women in our country is more rapidly growing than the rate of black males. So we white women, we don't realize that we are at risk and that there's something happening that isn't about all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of women who are becoming criminals. That's just not, that doesn't make any sense. So I think that in the black community, there have been people who have been thinking about this for a very long time, and there's intelligence that I have not come across anywhere else. And so I'm so excited, to talk to the community organizers, to talk to the people who have been thinking about this, Jesse Jackson, the people in the community who have been problem solving for years. They have a great deal of knowledge that, I think the rest of us are just coming around to. So I hope we can keep the dialogue going, and thank you for having Ron here. Thank you for, helping us to present the Chicago Street Journal, to your audience. And please write those letters to the editor. We'd like to publish them. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? All right. All right. All right. This has been a really interesting topic tonight. It's kind of interesting. I was interested to hear what Mr. Carter said about State Street. I moved to Chicago in 1975 when I was 9 years old. And
From where?
from Iowa.
Oh.
And we lived in Hyde Park. Actually, we lived in what was at that time the predominantly black section of Hyde Park. So when I lived there, all of my friends were black. And one time, I remember we were driving around on the south side, my parents and me, and we came to the very end of State Street, the southern end of it. And I said, and my dad said, "Hey, let's drive north and see how far it goes." We drove north. Of course, almost the entire length of State Street, not all, but the whole length of State Street up to downtown Chicago, up to the Loop, was of course it was all black people there, and to me it seemed very poor people too. But when you compare how, and as you get further north, as you get closer to downtown, you came to the Robert Taylor homes and all these big high-rises, huge buildings. And we thought of them as something bad. I mean, we thought of them as, my dad thought of them as like these housing projects as being like something out of Soviet Russia. But yeah, there were stores open and stuff. And now if you go down there, I mean, the high-rises are pretty much all gone, but so are most of the stores. So yeah, the area has really gotten depressed, and this has been talked about in the black community. I live on the south side today. I actually live in Hyde Park. I mean, that's the predominantly white neighborhood, but anyway, but in the black community, they do talk about the decline of locally owned businesses on the south side. Now, when I was in college, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and that was a real eye-opener for me. I mean, because he suggested even people that think, first of all, one of the things I realized, I tended to think of racism and all that sort of thing as something from the past, and mainly a Southern phenomenon. But it isn't. It's the whole United States. It's not just the South. Because Malcolm never lived in the South. And one thing he said was that, he went around saying white people were the devil. Malcolm didn't make up that idea though. At the time that he was saying that, he was a member of the Nation of Islam, and this is one of the NOI's teachings that going back to Elijah Muhammad, that white people, all white people, are a race of devils. And they have actually, and they mean this literally, they have an elaborate explanation as to how a renowned black scientist known as Dr. Yakub created the white race through genetic engineering at a time when everybody on Earth was black. He created this race of devils, and so according to Dr. Yakub, almost everybody here in this room, except for Mr. Carter, is a descendant of these genetically engineered devils created by Dr. Yakub. And so, now I guess probably some of you may have noticed that I'm wearing a Barack Obama t-shirt. I campaigned for Obama, so I'm not exactly unbiased here. I campaigned for Barack Obama for president in 2008 and then again in 2012. And how much time have I got left, Tim?
About a minute and a half.
Okay. And so I and I'm glad that I did. I do believe that he made a positive difference. A lot of people like to go after Obama, especially the kind of people I associate with. I'll be honest with you. I have a few black friends, but not many. Most of my friends are white, and so I always hear white people going after Obama. They're either because they're Republicans, so they just hate Obama because he's a Democrat, or else they're leftists, and they hate Obama because he isn't as far to the left as they are. But anyway, there always hear people going after Obama, but I want to kind of, I'm running out of time here, so I just want to close with a quote here. The change we need doesn't come from Washington. Change happens because the American people demand it, because they rise up and insist on new ideas and new leadership, a new politics for a new time. Anybody take a guess at who said that?
Obama.
That's right, Barack Obama said that. And I think with that I will close.
I thought it was mostly
Our speaker gets the last word.
You had 1 second.
Our speaker gets the last word.
Seconds up.
Our speaker gets the last word.
So, Rick, Don, so what does that,
Well, I must admit that I have enjoyed myself, and you all definitely have been enlightening to me, bringing me out of my world of the south side to the northwest side. It feels good, you know, really, and I really appreciate the energy. I do want your input, your direction. I do want to become partnership with you as I expand South Street Journal to Chicago Street Journal. So your letters, your input, your directions, and maybe I can draft you. Are you able to be drafted?
Why not?
All right, Mel, we gotta talk to this man, all right? So I want that input, I want your energy. And I think that with your energy, your guidance on how I should expand it. Yes, I come from the roots of that ghetto. I do believe in the country. I do believe that there's a lot this country can do. I do believe that we have people that are taking advantage of the goodness of our country. And that those of us that see that light, we need to inject that righteousness as much as possible in them. So again, thank you. And I welcome you to Chicago Street Journal, and I'm definitely, Mim and I will be coming here as often as we can to be a part of what you have, and even with Andy there, that has been contributing to a lot of insight. I do have some copies of the paper where Andy do have an article in there, and he has enlightened me. I didn't know these the folks that you hang out with, Andy. So, but I understand where your head is at now. So again, thank you, and we'll see you all again.
Very good.
All right.
Let me look. Yeah, let me look.